China does, it mixes in its own brand of expansive influence into its economics. And so it's not only the goods that we receive here, it's the principles too.
So, well, tell me a little bit more about that. What's at stake?
Well, what's at stake is our freedoms, or the principles that our country was founded upon, the principles that our international order was founded upon, are slowly being eroded by this hyper-connectedness of globalization and the internet. And China really understood how powerful openness was in terms of both economic development and growth, but also spreading its illiberal norms outward. We were so hubristic as Americans to believe, and we failed to recognize that over the years, over the long history of China, they've been invaded and conquered many times, and they have a unique ability to absorb those invaders and then slowly change them into Chinese. And so, in a sense, we thought we'd turn them into Americans, and really, in reality, what's happening is we're becoming more and more, and not Chinese, but certainly.
That's on everyone's mind right now, the U.S.-China trade war. I think you can bring some really and a very interesting perspective on this, as you were, at one point, essentially the China guy for the entire U.S. military, as I understand it. So why are we in this trade war? What's going on?
Well, I think trade war, people tend to focus on the first word of that, which is trade. And it's really not about trade. It's really about what kind of world do we want to live in. When you look at everything, the full scope of everything that China does, it mixes in its own brand of expansive influence into its economics. And so it's not only the goods that we receive here, it's the principles too.
So more about that. What's at stake?
Well, what's at stake is our freedoms, or the principles that our country was founded upon.
フリーダムのステークであると。
The principles that our international order was founded upon are slowly being eroded by this hyper-connectedness of globalization and the internet. And China, how powerful openness was in terms of both economic development and growth, but also spreading its illiberal norms outward. We were so hubristic as Americans to believe, and we failed to recognize that over the years, over the long history of China, they've been invaded and conquered many times, and they have a unique ability to absorb those invaders and then slowly change them into Chinese.
こういうことですよね。僕が今言った言葉ですよね。
And so, in a sense, we thought we'd turn them into Americans.
っていうのが僕の今言ったことですよね。
And really, in reality, what's happening is we're becoming more and more, and not Chinese, but certainly with the Chinese Communist Party, which is a Marxist-Leninist organization that's really a hybrid from what the Soviet Union was and actually what Nazi Germany was in terms of ideology and economics mixed in a way that is almost imperceptible with the way they distribute that. When you think of that in a globalized, internet-powered world, which, if you think of our founding fathers, we never had an internet. We didn't have globalization. They weren't things that they actually concerned themselves with, although they were worried about foreign influence. China has essentially operationalized those concepts for spreading or really suppressing any challenges to its rule in China. And the way it does that is by spreading oppression and suppression of freedoms, religion, speech, those things.
なので彼らの考え方を、世界に影響を与えていると、自由じゃない考え方になってきていると。そう考えるとディック・チェイリーのやってたことっていうのもサーベイランスステートのどっちかって言ったら中国が先にやってたことであって、その影響から向けてるかもしれないって言ったらそれもそうかもしれないですよね。一つの見方であれば。
This is absolutely fascinating. So, what do you make of the Chinese negotiators stepping away at the last moment, at presumably Xi Jinping's behest recently?
So Liu He, educated in the West, understands global economics. To some extent, they've been able to hijack openness for their own means. And essentially, the Trump administration said, and with Lighthizer negotiating, said no more. That has to stop. And if you think about this strategically from the Chinese perspective, they really only have one option here, and that is to further reform and open up. And so Liu He, I believe, recognized that. You know, China needs access to capital, needs access to technology, needs access to innovation. The only place you can get that is in the West. And therefore, he had negotiated essentially an agreement which would allow for some opening and reforms. Well, that got back to the leadership, and they most likely met about whether or not they wanted to go along that path. And much like June 4th, 1989, they decided that they were going to go another way. The challenge now is, how do you play that with an administration that is absolutely determined to get an agreement that actually can be enforced? In my opinion, the way you play that is to push the regime out that's your foe. And so I believe they're betting on they can put enough harm into the U.S. economy that the 2020 elections go to somebody else.
Fascinating. So, we've been talking with some other folks that have been on the show, actually, how, on one hand, there's all this talk about Russia.
今2020 election っていうこと、somebody else って言いましたよね。なので、このロシアじゃなくて中国の影響で、来年の選挙、まだトランプから別の人に移るかもしれないっていうのが、通信技術を通してですよ。っていうのが今言った言葉はですね、ちょっと大きな意味を持っているかと思います。現実かどうかは別として。
Influencing the election in 2016, which it certainly did to some extent, but now we see China kind of in plain sight trying to influence the election by targeting the specific regions where President Trump is vulnerable.
Regions, industries. You look at the Foxconn factory in Wisconsin. You look at the natural gas agreement in West Virginia. Each one of these are means for putting hooks into local politics in those regions or states, and then by then turning and saying, well, the president is making it very hard for us to continue these investments, many of which they never actually had any intention of ever following through with, then they can say, it's the president's fault that your economy is turning south. It's the president's fault that all these billions of dollars of promised investment aren't materializing. Never mind the fact that they usually never materialize, and you can go look at many examples where China has agreed to have investments of billions of dollars that actually never happen.
So I've been reading about the newest threat, which is halting, rare earth export.
もう一ついいですか？プレジデンツフォーってこれ誰を？
Many of which they never actually had in
これはどっちの
those
プレジデン
regions or states, and then by then turning and saying, well, the president is making it very hard for us to continue these investments,
プレジデンツ
many of which they never
いいですか？
politics. Each one of these are
specific regions where President Trump is vulnerable.
Regions, industries. You look at the Foxconn factory in Wisconsin. You look at the natural gas agreement in West Virginia. Each one of these are means for putting hooks into local politics in those regions or states, and then by then turning and saying, well, the president is making it very hard for us to continue these investments, many of which
President's making it hard to continue this investment. Investment の投資ですよね。President、つまり誰のお金ってどこに投資って言ったらそれはローカルの工場のことですよね。今の話でいくとね。それを確かにじゃあ大統領が投資するのは難しいと。難しい。要するにこれ言ったのは経済が潤わないのはトランプのせいであると。っていうことの発言が増やされるかもしれない。っていうことですかね。
which they never. each one of these are means for putting hooks into local politics in those regions or states, and then by then turning and saying, well, the president is making it very hard for us to continue these investments, many of which they never actually had any intention of ever following through with, then they can say, it's the president's fault that your economy is turning south. It's the president's fault that all these billions of dollars of promised investment aren't material.
そもそも投資するような流れはないのに、経済が潤わないのは大統領のせいだという方向に話を持っていくことができるとかもしれないと。
Materializing. Never mind the fact that they usually never materialize, and you can go look at many examples where China has agreed to have investments of billions of dollars that actually never happen.
トランプじゃなくて今のはチャイナの話でしたね。
So I've been reading about the newest threat, which is halting, rare earth export, which is rare earths are necessary for all sorts of key technologies we have. What do you make of this?
Well, I think it would be a terrible mistake on the part of the Chinese, and this is the problem. The Communist Party can't help itself. It finds itself, it believes itself to be under attack. In reality, what's happening is, for the first time, the American government is defending the American people and defending American companies in the international space. Chinese can't have that. They feel that it's by their right that they should have access to America's economy, to America's innovation, and that how dare we, defend that? How dare the American government defend that? And so it instead of seeing it like it is, which is our really our willingness or want to protect our own sovereignty, they see it as we're trying to essentially control the Chinese Communist Party or prevent China from growing anymore, which is absolutely incorrect. Nevertheless, their narrative to themselves is the United States is attacking us and therefore we must defend. Now, the way that I would defend if I were them is by opening up and reforming. But they can't do that because that means they lose some control. Therefore, they're going to squeeze harder. If you think about it, it's almost like you put Jell-O in your hand and you slowly start to squeeze. What happens to the Jell-O? It comes out from between your fingers. What's happening is their tendency is to squeeze more and more. And as they squeeze more and more, they actually lose control. And so I think their natural tendency is going to want to be to squeeze, and that looks like let's prevent rare earths from going to the United States. All that's going to do is going to force the United States to look at alternative means to rare earths. It's not going to help China's economy in any way. It's going to actually destroy the market for rare earths in China. It's control. And so I think their natural tendency is going to want to be to squeeze, and that looks like
there っていうのは中国ね。
let's prevent rare earths from going to the United States.
Rare earths from going to the United States.
All that's going to do is going to force the United States to look at alternative means to rare earths. It's not going to help China's economy in any
That doesn't help China's economy.
way. It's going to actually destroy the market for rare earths in China.
って言ってます。
I see. So, speaking of these, economic connections that have been forged over the last several decades with China into the global system, as you're saying, very deliberately, how does that play out vis-a-vis Wall Street? We're hearing talk of, the trade war moving to Wall Street. My perspective is it's been on Wall Street a while. Maybe we just didn't know it. What do you think about this?
Well, so there's billions of U.S. dollars in real estate in China. There are continuing flow of billions of dollars now into China's A shares, so they're into their stock market, the Shenzhen and the Shanghai stock market. Those are through American deposit receipts in Hong Kong. And so you have billions of U.S. dollars flowing into China at the same time that we're getting into this economic decoupling. And so, and from a macro perspective, you would say, well, that doesn't make a lot of sense. Why would those billions of dollars be flowing into there? Well, because Wall Street is essentially selling the stocks and bonds for China into Western capital markets. Why? Because they make a fee on that.
systems.
結局ウォールストリートの自分らの中心の目的で中国市場にみんな手をつけるように、情報を売ってるわけですよね。
So that sounds like it makes it a lot more difficult for the administration to achieve its goal of getting a fair deal.
Well, of course, if you think about it, if American retirement funds, so if your retirement, my retirement, are invested in China, then there's going to be a repercussion to your pension fund. And so, I think in some respects, the Chinese Communist Party and Wall Street are like this because it ties us closer together. It makes it more difficult for us to, enforce the rules of the road.
So what's the play here for the administration then? If this is, I'm not clear how big this is. It sounds like it's
billions of
sizable.
dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars.
Right.
Well, the play is enforce the rules. The rules say transparency is required
ね
for fiduciary responsibility for shareholders. That the SEC, FASB, the Financial Accounting Standards Boards, the PCAOB, the Auditing Board, all of them are required to actually look at the system and the companies that are in the system.
ごめんなさい。で、さっき僕が言いたかったことは、彼が言ってるのは、だから、情報の可視化を徹底するルールをみんなに植え付けなきゃいけないと。それができなかったら、そもそも話にならない。でも、中国はその可視化に協力はしない。彼らの会計はあってないようなものだからっていうのが言いたかったことです。
To make sure that they're actually portraying to the markets factual information. Of course, now you have China's law, which says, well, we can't actually share that information with you. So think about it.
ごめんなさい。
If you couldn't
ここで僕途切れちゃったんで。
enforce the rules.
Enforce
The
the
rules
rules.
say transparency is required for fiduciary responsibility for shareholders. That the SEC, FASB, the Financial Accounting Standards Boards, the PCAOB, the Auditing Board, all of them are required to actually look at the system and the companies that are in the system to make sure that they're actually portraying to the markets factual information. Of course, now you have China's law, which says, well, we can't actually share that information with you.
でも彼らはそれを、
So think about it. If you couldn't actually audit Intel, if you couldn't actually verify that their financial statements, that their 10Ks and their 10Qs were accurate, how do you know what you're investing in? Essentially, that's what you have for the entire Chinese stock market and bond sales. Yet we are selling those into the capital markets, and that's one of the ways that essentially China harnesses globalization. They actually need dollars, U.S. dollars, to grow their economy. They can't just grow it organically. Why? Because they need food, they need energy, they need resources to actually manufacture, to
Right.
build infrastructure. They have to buy those in the international market using U.S. dollars because that's the settlement currency that those goods require. How do they get dollars? Well, they have been getting dollars by exporting their goods to the U.S. and other countries. Well, that's slowly coming to a halt as most of these corporations move their manufacturing outside of China because of the tariffs. What's the other way you can get dollars? You can get dollars by selling financial instruments on capital markets. Financial instruments that have no inherent value. It used to be that if you were an investor, you could go and look at 10Ks and 10Qs and say, okay, if you look at all the cash on hand, if you look at all the assets of this company, my worst case on this valuation is X. And so I'm willing to invest knowing I have some kind of downside protection. If you recently, we had two companies in China that all of a sudden lost $6 billion. In other words, they were reporting to the market that they had $6 billion of cash on hand, and then all of a sudden they did a restatement and said, we don't know where that cash went.
こんなことあるんですね、中国では。
Now imagine if an American company just said, we just went and checked our bank account, and that $6 billion we were reporting to the market, it's not there. And then you say, okay, well, what happened to the money? Nobody knows. Well, can we get to the bottom of it? No, that's China's national security
これは
data.
何
You
こと言って
can't
るのは
have it.
ウェルスファンドのこと言ってるんだね。
ウェルズ
中国、
ですかね。
各都市がさ、投資してどっか行っちゃうんですよ、お金。
でも実際に
領債
でも実際にその領債権じゃあ結論としてどうなるんですかって言ってもその情報を中国が開示しないと。じゃあそのことでしょうね。
So you're saying that basically Wall Street just takes on faith the value of these companies?
Of course.
That just sounds utterly insane.
For American deposit receipt, it's a 30-page glossy that goes out to buyers, right? That's what Wall Street is sending to the buyers is a 30-page glossy.
30 page glossy って僕よくわかんないんですけど、ウォールストリートのこれ話わかります？
なんていうの
30 page glossy GLOSSY だと思うんですよ。
It's not there. And then you say, okay, well, what happened to the money? Nobody knows. Well, can we get to the bottom of it? No, that's China's national security data. You can't have it.
Rob, so you're saying that basically Wall Street just takes on faith the value of these companies?
Of course.
That just sounds utterly insane.
For American deposit receipt,
American
グラッシーじゃない。
グラシーなんですか？
グラッシー。草深い。
いやのその光沢のあるやつ、そうですよね。
光沢のあるグロッシー。
で
L か R か。
グラシー、いやグロスって言って
グロ
ます。
ッシー。
that
光沢の
The
ある。
value of these companies?
of course.
That just sounds utterly insane.
For American deposit receipt, it's a 30-page glossy that goes out to buyers, right? That's what Wall Street is sending to the buyers is a 30-page glossy.
多分でも俗語なんでしょうね。30ページのだから多分そういうようなフォーマットがあるんでしょうね。30ページの。
Guess who it's produced by? It's produced by Communist Party members in Hong Kong and in China.
It just sounds.
これ言ってることは中国はアメリカのドルを受け取ってその預金受け取りましたよっていうことを30ページの受け取ったっていう証明書を出しますと。でもその投資した額のそのままの価値観がどっか行っちゃうと。
Sounds unreal, doesn't it?
Well, of course, but I mean, if have you seen the China Hustle where they were doing the reverse mergers into basically companies that had no assets,
Right.
and then walking away with the money and leaving.
また別の時にまたお話しします。
もうそれぐらいしよう。
That happened.
もうちょい。
It's there in the West. There's a sucker born every day, and we're suckers for what Wall Street tells us is a great deal.
So, let's say that their transparency is actually being demanded, or at least more transparency in this deal that's being worked out. Does suddenly all these companies that we thought were valuable, or Americans thought were valuable, are actually not nearly as valuable, in some cases not valuable at all. How does that play out economically for us?
Well,
こういったのはもしですからね。もし情報を全部開示したとして価値がないものを買わされていると分かったらどうなるか。
you remember how Al Capone was eventually brought to heel?
Yeah.
It was because somebody found his books.
Okay.
And not only found his books, but found the accountant that actually ran the books so he could translate the code of the books. Right? The problem with Chinese companies is you don't know what the books are. Even if you have the books, you can't trust that they're actually real. It's the entire nature of the way business is done in China
ここです。entire nature of how business done in China が
currently. What China does is essentially ensure that within its own borders, you can do pretty much anything you want, as long as you don't.
ここがすごく大事なことです。ここすごく大事なことです。
It's the entire nature of the way business is done in China currently. What China does is essentially ensure that within its own borders, you can do pretty much anything you want, as long as you don't challenge the Chinese Communist Party.
なんですよ。だから CCP と対立さえしなければ何でもやっていいってことなんです。ただし目をつけられちゃ終わりだよと。
And so that results in a very laissez-faire capitalist, really, economy. Inside of China, the competition is cutthroat. But it also means you can get away with just about anything as long as you're not creating a problem for the Communist Party. That means that any rule of law or any fiduciary responsibility or any semblance of what we would consider to be an ability to do a fact-based assessment on an investment it's completely not available in China, and under the current regime will never be available. That is what's sold into the U.S. on the pretense that, well, it's just their economy's been growing at double-digit rates for many years, and now it's at 6.5%. That your money is going to be safe over there. And oh, by the way, because it's a totalitarian regime, that there's an implicit guarantee by the Chinese government that will protect your investment. Except banks are failing, companies are failing, they're failing to pay on their bonds. What was Venezuela before it was what it currently is today? It had assets that were owned by foreign companies doing well. Then what did they do? They seized all the assets, right? So remember I said
ベネズエラでは国が資産を全部取り上げたんですか？
いや、ベネズエラで外国企業が資産を持ってたから。
ああ、じゃあ外国企業の資産全部国が取り上げたんですか？
じゃなくて、
seized all assets。seized は取り上げるですよね。
seized だけど外国企業が資産を持ってるから、ベネズエラはそういう意味ではさっき言ったシノビみたいにいい加減じゃない。
そう言ってない。そうは言ってない。いい加減じゃないなんてこと言ってない。
by the Chinese government that will protect your investment. Except banks are failing, companies are failing, they're failing to pay on their bonds. What was Venezuela before it was what it currently is today? It had assets that were owned by foreign companies doing well. Then what did they do? They seized all the assets.
seized は外国企業。
シーズは外国企業の名前じゃないですよ。
外国企業が資産を持ってる。
いや、持っていたのをベネズエラ政府が全部取ったんですよ。
あ、そうなの？
だから現在の政府になる前だから多分独裁だったですよね。
チ
ャベスかな？現状の政権じゃないですから。
あ、そうなの
？seizure。
seizure は取るっていう。取る。
そうですよね。
で、
they seized
チャベスが取ったの。
This before it was what it currently is today.
Before what is currently is today.
It had assets that were owned by foreign companies.
Assets owned by foreign companies.
Doing well.
Then
what did they do? They seized all.
ね、they ってのは government ね。They seized all the assets. だから、government がforeign companies のアセットを全部取り上げましたと。でそういうことをベネズエラもやってたじゃないかと。
All the assets, right? So remember I said the fist is tightening. As that fist gets tighter and tighter, I think one of the things that you can expect is that assets of Western companies are going to be the next to go.
Going to be the next to go. だからthey seize all assets っていうのは今度は中国でも、ね、西洋資産が全部いってるのを結局は中国が全部吸い上げるんじゃないかと。
So if you're right and the CCP is going after, basically making sure that President Trump doesn't get elected, get a more friendly
さっきの2020年の話ですね。
administration, something like that. What can the administration do now to basically fend off Chinese interference?
Yeah, well, I think what they could do is something that they haven't done yet is explain the tie between China's economic behavior and its need to shape the world in its own image. Now, the State Department is doing a good job talking for once in a long time about human rights, about freedoms, about universal freedoms, and particularly.